I am my mum, sisters and brother. Scissors, paper, rock.
I am honks of ferries, Aboriginal ceremonial music, city lights at night in the rain.
A beautiful mix of history, nature, landscape and community. I am late afternoon sunlight in autumn and winter.
I am a special day, which means hardships from the overpriced cafe.
I am at my home with my dog.
I am the rage when drivers honk constantly and loud cars or motorbikes screech down the street. I am birds tweeting in the trees. They are so alive.
I am family, sport and good times.
I am a rage when I miss out on something fun.
I'm a walk across the harbour bridge on a rainy day. I'm the smell of wet grass. Reminds me of autumn in Sudan.
I am colours, different people, adventures.
I am the leisure centre with the super cool pool.
I am enjoying cafes, markets and live music venues. I am the rage when told it's time to go at 10:30 p.m.
I'm the taste of Indian sweets from Elizabeth Street restaurants.
I am my family, curiosity, this new place.
I'm the rage when I see racism.
I am the rage when people talk too much.
I am the park playing and sliding.
I am the smell of fried garlic and interesting influences from around the world.
I am Central Park. It's awesome and futuristic.
I love the creativity and diversity of people living here.
I'm in Redfern Park, speaking and meeting with friends and making new ones.
I am the streetscape, morning swims, inner city living.
I am the sun because it is in Sydney.
My future is here.
I am Sydney.
We are Sydney!
Good evening, everybody. Would you please welcome your MC for this evening, Patricia Cavalas.
Hello everybody, I'm Patricia Carvallis and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we stand, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. I'm here with you tonight for a very significant City Talks. Significant because we are welcoming all of you, a live audience, back to Sydney Town Hall, and it deserves a clap. I cannot tell you how much it fills my heart with joy to see a room like this full of curious people who want to hear plans for their city's future. It is exactly what we need to be doing right now. We're also here, of course, to connect two giants of planning, people who I know are familiar to you. Two mayors of two global cities, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover, and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who continue to work towards achieving a green, global and connected city now and in the future. Now, later in the City Talks, we will also be joined this evening by the Honourable Matt Keane MP, who's the New South Wales Treasurer and the Minister for Energy, and of course other global and local experts. It will be a fascinating night of conversations, I can guarantee you. Before we continue, I'd like to welcome to the stage Uncle Alan Madden to the stage for a welcome to country. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Alan Madden, Gadigal Elder. I was looking around a bit earlier when all the lights were on, and it made me feel very proud. I was seeing a lot of my mob here, our grey-haired mob. Welcome to country to me is always an honour and a pleasure. Just to give you a bit of an insight of where you are and who we are. Lord Mayor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge our First Nations and traditional owners of the lands that you may have come from and pay my respects. To all our Aboriginal elders, all elders, past and present, also pay my respects. To all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters, from whatever Aboriginal or island nation you may have come from, welcome to Gadigal. And to all our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. No matter where you've come from, whether it be across the seas, across the state or across town, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. And as I've mentioned many times before, was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. Only three things shorter than that: coming, taxation and going. It's an honour and pleasure to be here this evening to welcome one and all to Gadigal. Gadigal is one of 29 clans of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation is bounded by nature's own, the Hawkesbury River to the north, Nepean to the west, and Georges River to the south. And in between those three mighty rivers is the Eora Nation. And in that nation there are 29 clans, and the clan's land we're on this evening is Gadigal. On behalf of members of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and of the Gadigal mob, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. And as I've mentioned, there's an old Aboriginal saying out there, and I think it's very appropriate for you mob here tonight. They say, where there's a will, there's relatives. So once again, on behalf of the Land Council and of the Gadigal mob, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
And thank you to Uncle Alan Madden from the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. And just a reflection on that, I do think we always invite somebody, of course, to welcome us to country, but to think deeply about where we are and the history of where we stand. Jessica Barker was a member of the citizens' jury, which included residents, students and workers. Now, that jury worked together over 3 months to recommend to the City of Sydney what concepts should be implemented in the Sustainable Sydney 2030 to 2050 continuing the vision to realise the community's vision for the future. Please welcome Jessica Barker.
A letter to the future. Dear Sydney-siders in 2050. In August 2019, a group of 50 Sydney-siders came together over 3 months, faced with a huge task: to imagine Sydney in 30 years' time. We invested our time and personal energy towards creating a vision for the people of the future. Our discussions have been deeply influenced by what was happening around us. Sydney is ringed by bushfires, highlighting the global climate change crisis. Droughts across the state have meant tighter water restrictions. We are witnessing our neighbourhoods change as a result of the increasing cost of real estate in Sydney. And we are spending countless hours in congested traffic. Those of us who were living in Sydney 30 years ago now know that Sydney has changed dramatically in that time, and we are certain it will continue to change in the next 30 to come. In working with the City of Sydney, we have been given the opportunity and responsibility to come up with a vision for the future of the city and bridge the past with the future. In looking forward, we also have to look back. It is important that we acknowledge the connection that the Eora Nation have had for thousands of years to the land that Sydney is built on. It is important that we acknowledge the negative impact of colonisation on the landscape and its traditional custodians. We have much to learn from our First Nations people about nurturing and respecting the land. Our hope for Sydney in 2050 is that it is a sustainable, inclusive, diverse city that is welcoming and embraces people from all walks of life. A city where people want to live. Citizens Jury 2019.
Thank you, Jessica, and what an absolutely beautiful vision for what this city should be. We face global challenges with a climate emergency, issues of inclusion and social justice, and a pandemic and its economic impacts. Cities are a critical part of the solution. They are a key part of the solution. The City of Sydney has a vision. Sustainable Sydney 2030 to 2050, continuing the vision. This builds on what is really a transformative city-shaping projects and programs from Sustainable Sydney 2030, such as the George Street project, which is now a reality. I remember moving to this city many, many years ago thinking, what a terrible, awful street. And now when I'm here, I cannot believe it's actually happened in my lifetime. It took vision, but it happened, and it is glorious. It was shaped by listening to the voices of everyone who wants to meet these challenges and for Sydney to thrive. The community confirmed the directions in Sustainable Sydney 2030 and wanted more, as they should. It will guide the city into the future. Sustainable Sydney 2030 to 2050, continuing the vision, has future-focused ideas that are essential for the success of Sydney as the powerhouse of New South Wales and Australia. The City of Sydney has established its credentials for leading change. Now they are primed and they're ready for more. To tell us about Sustainable Sydney 2030 to 2050, continuing the vision, is Sydney's longest-serving mayor, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover. Please welcome Clover to the stage.
Thank you, Patricia, and good evening, everyone. What a magic sight to see you all here. So thank you so much for coming. This is terrific, an absolutely full town hall. So I would like to thank Uncle Alan for his welcome, and I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, and also acknowledge the people of the very many nations who live in our city. I would like to welcome the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and Jan Gell of Gell Architects for joining us remotely. The Honourable Matt Keane, New South Wales Treasurer and Minister for Energy. Ken Marr, Architect and Chair of our Design Advisory Panel. Nikki Huntley of Climate Council and Social Outcomes. Gabriel Metcalfe, CEO of the Committee for Sydney. Oz Harvest founder and CEO Ronnie Khan. Emily McDaniel, Director and Curator, and Jessica Parker, whom you've just heard from our Citizens Jury. So, a very warm welcome to you all. When the independent team was first elected in 2004, we wanted a plan for Sydney for the long term. We knew that global warming was a reality that would only worsen as governments and people continued the pretence that it wasn't a threat. We embarked on the most comprehensive consultation the city had ever undertaken. Sustainable Sydney 2030 was the result. It was a blueprint for a city that's environmentally, economically, culturally and socially sustainable. And it's the cornerstone of everything we do, and it's been updated as changes have occurred. Our vision for a green, global and connected city was adopted and roundly supported by residents and businesses. The transformation was built on a foundation of ambitious targets, and I will outline key priorities. We made a commitment to reduce emissions in our city-owned operations at the city by 70% by 2030. We did the master plans, we set the targets, we took the action, and we've met our goal 9 years early in 2021. Climate action underpins everything. I've tried to pass that news on to Angus Taylor, but he's not interested. Climate action underpins all that we do. We became carbon neutral in 2007. We're the first city government in Australia to receive that certification. We've converted over 6,000 street lights to LED and fast-track plans to do the remaining 9,500. We've installed over 6,000 solar panels across 40 city-owned buildings. We procured one of Australia's largest hybrid and electric vehicle fleets, and we're trialling electric garbage trucks and street sweepers, so look out for them. We switched to 100% renewable electricity in July 2020, reducing emissions and saving our ratepayers $500,000 a year for 10 years, and creating jobs in regional New South Wales in wind and solar farms at Glen Innes, Wagga Wagga and Shoalhaven. Our leading partners include the Better Buildings Partnership, City Switch Green Office, Sustainable Destination Partnership and the Smart Green Apartments program. The Better Building Partnership demonstrates how action on climate change is good for business and the economy. The partnership represents 59% of commercial office space in the city centre, with members including major building owners like Dexus, Lendlease, Mirvac, GPT. They committed to our Sustainable 2030 goal and have reduced their emissions already by 55%, and they're tracking towards 83% by 2030. They've reduced water use by 26%. They're saving $30 million a year, while partners who own 88 buildings have committed to achieving net zero emissions or becoming carbon positive on or before 2030. And since 2006, our city economy has expanded by 53%. In that time, emissions have declined by 26%, despite a doubling of our population. If it had been business as usual, emissions would have increased by 57%. But urgent action is still needed, and our new target is net zero by 2035. We've installed Metropolitan Sydney's largest urban water recycling centre in Green Square, which treats up to 900,000 litres of stormwater every day to provide recycled water for residents and community facilities in our town centre. We have 20 stormwater harvesting systems in our parks, which provide 80,000 litres of non-potable water every day to keep our parks and streets green. And we completed Sydney's largest stormwater harvesting system in Sydney Park wetlands. Greening our city has been a top priority since 2004. One of our first actions was to purchase land for $11 million from the state government to create Pyramid Park in Pyrmont. And in 2011, we negotiated substantial new parkland in Harold Park as part of the redevelopment of the Paceway. And we've created over 24 hectares of new parkland. And we've invested $23 million to transform Sydney Park into a 40-hectare oasis. We've renewed open spaces from Glebe to Rosebery, Darlinghurst to Beaconsfield. And when the Drying Green Park at Green Square is open, it'll be the biggest of more than 40 parks we're delivering together with developers in our urban renewal area. The quality of our open spaces was internationally recognised with the prestigious jury award at the Archester A+ Awards in New York, one of a number we've won over the past year. We're already experiencing the impacts of climate change. By 2050, urban heating is predicted to increase temperatures between 1.5 and 3 degrees. So it's vital we plan, invest and adapt. We see trees and green spaces as essential infrastructure. An effective and extensive canopy cover can help reduce temperatures on the ground by up to 10 degrees. We now plan to use innovation and design to create more planting opportunities. We're running out of pavement. Practical ways to green our roofs and walls, and we're going to green our network of laneways and narrow streets, and introduce planning tools to ensure we're greening equitably right across the city. We plan to increase our canopy by over 50% by 2030 and 75% by 2050. Walking and cycling are integral to a sustainable city. They lead to calm, quiet and livable cities. Public, shared and active transport reduce emissions, congestion and competition for scarce parking spaces and improve people's health and the city's economy. Since 2007, we've built 38% of the bike network. That's more than 25 kilometres of safe, separated cycleways, 60 kilometres of shared paths and 40 kilometres of other infrastructure for cycling. The quality of our walking environment is important. for maintaining global and competitiveness and reputation. Walking is how people experience our city. Our streets and public spaces are the face we show the world. In 2036, it's predicted that 1.7 million people will visit the city daily and 2 million by 2050. Our current footpaths can't accommodate that growth in the number of people walking. So our new target is that by 2050, 9 out of 10 people travelling to the city centre and 2 out of 3 in the rest of our area will travel to work by public transport, walk or cycle. The central public domain concern outlined in Sustainable 2030 was that our global city status and competitiveness were severely compromised by the poor quality of our main street, George Street, which was a noisy, smelly traffic sewer with 40 polluting buses a daily occurrence. Sustainable Sydney 2030 proposed that a light rail running down George Street would be the catalyst for CBD transformation and investment. The state government signed up to the project. Thank you, Gladys Berejiklian, and thank you to Jan Gell for the inspiration, and the city contributed $265 million to make George Street the beautiful tree-lined, pedestrian-friendly boulevard we see today. And do you remember how everyone said, you'll never do it, you'll never get cars out of George Street, it will never happen. 2GB went off the radar. And Alan Jones and the Daily Telegraph did too, but I think they probably have now changed their mind. This project was supported by a program of laneway upgrades, millions in grants for arts and activation, and a campaign to allow small bars. The CBD of Sydney has truly been transformed and has attracted investment of over $8 billion. Design excellence has been an integral part of the city's vision for private development, as well as for our own projects. The city's won more than 113 national and international awards for our projects over the past 17 years. In 2007, we established the Design Advisory Panel of architects, landscape architects, arts and sustainability experts to give advice on major city projects and significant private developments. They have played a major role in raising design standards across the city, while our Public Art Advisory Panel has contributed to a legacy of contemporary public art to enrich our city. The City of Sydney has embodied design excellence in our practice, our planning controls and our projects. Since 2004, we've hosted 146 design competitions. Delivering affordable housing has been one of our greatest challenges. Even though this is a state responsibility, we have achieved 800 homes with 2,000 in the pipeline. We've invested in projects that support homeless people, young people and the aged. Sustainable Sydney 2050 maintains our 7.5 target for affordable and social housing. Our commitment is to do everything we can to increase supply. We lobby state and federal governments. We've offered city-owned land and property to not-for-profit housing providers, and we've fought to maximise social housing at Waterloo in the face of the New South Wales Government's planned redevelopment, which proposes majority housing to be for private sale. We don't believe public housing tenants should be pushed to the fringes of Sydney and left without the support of their community and without access to the services they need. Nor is it good for the efficient running of our cities to have essential workers, the nurses, the firemen, the police, the transport workers and others who keep our city healthy, safe and functioning to be pushed into locations remote from their jobs. No city vision would be complete without continuing our dedication to our First Nations people. Following consultations, Sustainable Sydney 2030 established the Eora Journey as a unifying narrative, bringing the elements of the Indigenous representation, inclusion and social justice together. Our Stretch Reconciliation Action Plan outlines our commitments. The Eora Journey in the public domain identifies sites or histories of significance and reveals them so that in time our city's Indigenous story will be fully expressed. Barra in the Gardens above the Opera House is complete. It's modelled by the hooks made from the shells by Aboriginal women, Barangaroo and her friends, fishing in the shallows of the harbour. We haven't opened it officially yet because of COVID, but it's there waiting to be opened. The 2050 vision extends future directions and initiatives for Sydney's cultural life, which was a key commitment of 2030. We want to build on our successes, such as the creation of the Eternity Playhouse. in Darlinghurst, the Hayes Theatre in Potts Point, and the soon-to-be-open City Creative Centre in Bathurst Street. We're currently proposing planning bonuses to revitalise the iconic Oxford Street precinct and facilitate the development of a new cultural precinct in Alexandria. Co-location of a number of creatives helps stimulate the establishment of further similar cultural uses. For city families and their children, we've built or facilitated new childcare, playgrounds, pools, including the award-winning Ganyama Aquatic Centre, libraries, youth centres, East Sydney Community and Arts Centre, and the Adjointon Avenue Creative Centre, 3 new pool complexes, basketball and tennis courts. It's worth noting that since 2004, the residential population has increased by 67%. Families are now choosing to live in our city. Local jobs have increased by 54.3%, and pre-COVID, we had 1.3 million people in our city every day. Our city is worth $132 billion worth of economic activity. Pre-COVID, it was $138 billion, or 20% of the state's economic activity and 9% of the national GDP. The project ideas we outlined in the Sustainable City 2030 provided a catalyst for the transformation that's occurred, most notably the light rail and pedestrianisation of George Street. Sustainable City 2030 to 2050 proposes the next set of project ideas to ensure we continue as a green, global and connected city. Firstly, there's a strong desire to recognise Sydney's richness and diversity, and we're working on Yanuarala. I haven't quite got that yet. A harbourfront walk that shares Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture. Secondly, Sydney is home to major national and local institutions, so supporting our cultural sector through precinct revitalisation, making affordable creative spaces and establishing a creative land trust is critical to nurturing our creatives. The Oxford Street precinct revitalisation and the proposal for the National Arts School will contribute to transforming the area into a major cultural destination. Thirdly, the harbour is one of Sydney's great assets, and we are working with Sydney Water to clean outflows into the harbour in order to enable swimming, a haven for tourists and residents alike. Fourthly, the Metro provides an opportunity to connect current and future innovation, knowledge and employment centres across our city and in metropolitan Sydney. We hope to foster an innovation precinct to support the economy in the future. The Metro also offers opportunities to transform key city gateway roads such as Oxford Street, Botany Road and Broadway, currently dominated by traffic, into green, pedestrianised and cycling-friendly avenues, making them welcoming entries to the city centre and further greening our city. Other projects include unlocking spaces such as Moore Park Golf Course to create public parkland, which is critical to the health and well-being of the tens of thousands of new residents in Green Square. By 2050, we'll cater for increasing numbers of pedestrians, pedestrianising Park Street to connect Hyde Park and provide a crucial east-west link for pedestrians is in line with Yarngel's vision, while Loftus Street and Circular Quay is an opportunity to create another pedestrianised street, closed to traffic and open to outdoor dining in this crucial tourist hub. Finally, realising our 3 city squares at the Quay, Town Hall and Central, which are now linked by transformed George Street. These are just some of the aspirational projects outlined in Sustainable 2030 to 2050. They'll help us continue to realise our green, global and connected vision for Sydney. The Sustainable Sydney 2030 vision inspired and delivered transformation. With so much already achieved, we're continuing and extending our targets, our ambition and ourselves to continue the vision to 2050. Thank you.
And thank you, Lord Mayor, for your address. Now, the Lord Mayor will be back on stage for an in conversation shortly, but it's time to introduce our next guest. Sadiq Khan has served as the Mayor of London since 2016. In 2018, he was included in Time magazine's 100 list of the most influential people in the world. He's also the current global chair of the C40 cities. In his 2021 re-election campaign, Mayor Khan pledged to invest in the economy to help central London recover from COVID-19, increase housing affordability, make the city carbon neutral by 2030, and released his ambitious city centre proposal for London. To tell us more about his vision for London, please welcome live from London, Mayor Sadiq Khan.
Well, thank you, Patricia, for that kind introduction, and thank you for the warm applause from the crowd. And thank you, Lord Mayor, for inviting me to speak today. It's an honour to be able to take part in this important annual event. I want to start by paying tribute to you, Clover, not only for winning a 5th term as Lord Mayor, which is an incredible achievement, but for your leadership on some absolutely crucial issues facing our cities, our local economies, and our societies. The implementation of the City of Sydney's long-term plan, Sustainable Sydney 2030, has been an inspiration for us in London and many other cities around the world. We've seen how it's underpinned your city's work to create a greener, fairer, more sustainable place for the citizens of Sydney. And it's exciting to hear Clover talk today about the updated plan, which is not only about continuing this vision, but setting even more ambitious environmental, economic, and cultural aspirations. I look forward to seeing how this unfolds in the years ahead, and unashamedly looking for things we can steal, copy, and implement here in London too. I know we have an opportunity shortly to discuss a number of different issues facing our cities, so I just want to use my speech to focus on 2 areas in particular which are very much intertwined: protecting our environment by tackling climate change and delivering a strong, fair recovery from the pandemic. There's no doubt that the climate crisis is the biggest global threat we face today. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a true crisis in every sense of the word, but it could pale in comparison to the impact of the climate emergency. That's why, as we emerge from the pandemic, we must grow back greener. I passionately believe that cities have a key role to play in this effort. Indeed, one of the reasons I've been so excited about becoming the chair of the C40 network of international megacities is because of the enormous potential that cities have to make a defining difference in the fight for the future of our planet. I've seen how cities now link together like never before to form the beating heart of our global economy, and how we account for the vast majority of innovation. Like Sydney, I'm determined to ensure that London continues to be a global leader in tackling the climate crisis. We've committed to making London a zero-carbon city by 2030. We've divested London's pension funds from fossil fuel industries. We're making our public transport network cleaner and greener. We're ensuring it's easier to cycle safely around our city. We're making our city greener by opening new parks and planting a record number of trees. And we're pushing ahead with the boldest plans of any major city in the world to tackle air pollution, introducing the ultra-low emission zone, which has already reduced harmful levels of pollution by half in central London. But like you, we know we need to keep up the pace and go much further, because all the evidence shows that we're running out of time. When it comes to our recovery plans in London, our ambitions are similar to yours in Sydney. We're seeking to address inequalities that have been exposed and exacerbated by the pandemic. to make our city greener, cleaner, and more sustainable, and ultimately to ensure London is a better city after the pandemic than it was before. As part of these efforts, we've managed to bring together for the very first time London's key public sector institutions, local authorities, trade unions, businesses, faith groups, and community leaders under one umbrella, the London Recovery Board, with shared values of fairness, equality, and inclusion, and with a shared vision for a city where no one is left behind. Let me end with another thank you. Thank you, Sydney, for always being a staunch friend of London and for sending us so many great Australians over the years. London really wouldn't be the same without our Australian community. And thank you again, Lord Mayor, and everyone who's worked on your updated plan, not just for the bold initiatives that will improve many lives, but for setting an example of what's possible for other cities around the world. I look forward to our discussion.
And thank you, Mayor Khan, and what a wonderful address. Look, it's time now for our in-conversation between these two global city leaders. And just before we begin, there are some significant similarities worth pointing out, I believe, between the two cities, including that they both have been long-term visionaries, if you like. They have long-term plans and stewardship to guide the future of each city. So that kind of long-term vision rather than short-term plans really is at the centre of the way that they operate. They are both part of the C40, with, of course, Mayor Khan, as you mentioned, Mayor Khan, the global chair of the C40 cities. And they both have resilience plans and participate in the World Cities Cultural Forum as well. So there are a lot of similarities and synergies between these two global cities. I want to begin our conversation, if we can, with a question posed to you, if I can, Mayor Khan. And I will begin on the climate emergency, where both you and the Lord Mayor, Clover Moore, have focused. I want you to talk us through the work that you've been doing to reduce air pollution and carbon emissions in London and the kind of dividends that are being produced as a result of that vision.
Look, one of the things that we realised some time ago was that when you talk about climate change and the climate crisis, people often think this is a long time in the future and doesn't affect us now. So we also talk about air pollution, which is a now problem, and a health crisis. And so what we've sought to do is to make sure Londoners are aware in real time how bad air pollution is, and then have their permission to bring in bold policies. And we've brought in, Patricia, one of the boldest policies in the world. It applies the polluter pays principle, and we have what's called an ultra-low emission zone, which means if you have a polluting vehicle, you've got to pay £12.50 to bring your polluting vehicle into the centre of our city, into inner London. And what that's meant is fewer people are bringing in pollution vehicles, people have transferred to cleaner vehicles or walking and cycling, and we've reduced the toxic air by half in the centre, but also reduced carbon emissions already by 6% in 2 years. And we're now rolling this zone out to all of London. And the idea is to tackle both air pollution at the same time reducing carbon emissions, to making it easier to walk and cycle and making public transport more attractive as well.
Lord Mayor, while both cities are trying to urgently tackle the climate emergency, that's quite obvious from both of you that is a central component to your agenda. The City of Sydney is embarking on a different way to the City of London. I know that the heat is a huge issue in Sydney. How are you creating a kind of cool, green and livable city?
Heat is a number one issue for us in Sydney. In fact, our greatest challenge is heat. We're the driest continent on Earth, and just a couple of summers ago, Penrith in the metropolitan area was the hottest place on Earth. It had a temperature of about 49 degrees. So this is something that we are really aware of. All our research shows us this is going to have a greater impact on us than bushfires or floods. It's going to be the heating of our cities. And so increasing our canopy has been a major issue, and I talked a bit about this in my speech, but we have increased our canopy already, and we're making very strong commitments to take that even further. And we know that then can reduce temperature on the ground by at least 10 degrees. So this is really very important. We also want to, take that back those areas of more park for public parkland, but we think this is a key issue for us.
Mayor Khan, tell me about the kind of globally competitive city elements, the dividend you get from taking the approach that you described before. Like when you compare London to other global cities around the world, what benefits do you get that make your city more competitive by taking the approach that you've taken?
Well, look, I think one of the things about cities is we attract foreigners, and that's a good thing, whether they're international tourists, international students, international business. But you've got to make sure you're an attractive place for people to come to business, come and study, come on holiday, come and live, move permanently. What we've recognised is actually having a green future, a greener city with a Green New Deal, actually makes business sense as well. There is a first move advantage in building the solar panels, in the wind technology, in electric vehicle charging points, in electric vehicles, in making these things. The world's first double-decker hydrogen bus was in London, the world's first double-decker electric bus. And so there are business opportunities here as well. And being pro-green is being pro-business. You can save the planet, but also create good, green, sustainable jobs. And we'll do that in London.
I want to switch the conversation, if we can, to the post-COVID world. And Mayor Khan, just staying with you, what measures are you taking to ensure that the recovery post-COVID is inclusive and equal and addresses the inequalities that existed before the pandemic but were no doubt exacerbated by the pandemic?
Yeah, this has been one of the biggest lessons we've learned over the last 2 years. I know Clover's got similar experiences in Sydney. What this pandemic has done is both expose and exacerbate inequalities that already existed in our societies. And business as usual, going back to how things were, I think would be poor and would be appalling. And so what we have to do is use this opportunity, and it's horrible, I feel bad using the word opportunity when it comes to a pandemic that's taken lives and livelihoods, but there is an opportunity here in how we do government and how we make sure that we grow back greener and build back better. So in London, we're doing government differently. I've brought together various parts of what I call Team London, the business community, the faith communities, the health service, the police, the fire service, the voluntary and community sector. And we're sharing resources, we're removing the silos, and we have shared recovery missions. We've got 9 recovery missions, like a new Green Deal, like a New Deal for young people, like digital access and so forth, things we've realised are important for our city. And we're working together to make sure we achieve those in short time. It's really important to make sure we don't miss the opportunity created by the pandemic to learn the lessons that the pandemic showed us. And one of those is, when there's finite resources, by pooling budgets, by pooling time, we can achieve far, far more together.
Lord Mayor, I want to discuss that with you as well. COVID has obviously had a big impact on Sydney and Australia as well. The City of Sydney has urgently developed a kind of community recovery plan to support impacted communities. Tell me about that plan and the way that you executed it during the pandemic and now that Sydney's reopened, as is very obvious tonight.
Yes, with all these people here tonight, it's wonderful. Well, during the pandemic, we worked to support our most vulnerable, to ensure that they had food, they had opportunity to be tested and opportunities for vaccination. We worked with about 60 agencies, including especially Oz Harvest, to feed people. I think it's incredible in a first world country like Australia that we had to spend millions of dollars on feeding people during the pandemic, and we did. We also, during the pandemic, we worked to help particularly our creatives and our small businesses survive through whole rounds of grants, so that they would still be there when we came out. And now we're running, we have just launched a program for our precincts. It's to we had a very successful program which was called the YCK, York, Clarence and Kent Streets, where the bar owners in those streets all came together to activate their precinct because of the tremendous downturn in the city at the time. That was a great success. So we've now launched a program to encourage other groups, whether it be down in Chinatown or in Crown Street or in Darlinghurst Road, to come together with the other businesses in the area to do these sorts of activations. Something else that's been one thing that was very, I think, following on from what Sadiq has said, the COVID taught us we could do things we couldn't do before. And we're meant to be a very free and easy country, but we're bound down by lots of rules. And it was amazing how during COVID it became easy for the government to sort of reduce the regulations and rules. We had a terribly difficult time to get our cycle network up, back in 2008. But now the government actually partnered with us to put cycle lanes in so that more people could cycle because they couldn't travel on public transport because of COVID. That was a real breakthrough. Then it was agreed that we could have outdoor dining, not only on the footpath, but on the roadway. The sacred roadway only meant to be for vehicles could actually have people sitting there and socialising, spacing, in a responsible way. And I think we've waived $4 million worth of outdoor dining fees. We've signed off on about 400 applications to do this. It's really taken off. The other thing we did to activate our various villages particularly and get the business and to encourage the community too. Everyone was a bit down after being locked up for so long. And so we've had this series of summer streets where we'd close the streets to vehicles, open them to people. We'd pay the performers because, our creators and our performers have taken such a huge hit with COVID. We paid them, they performed and entertained people. People came out and sat in our streets. We didn't have to cater for it because the businesses were doing really well, and the joyful opportunity of allowing people to come together and celebrate being together, celebrating everything about being able to be together and supporting our performers. Well, we'd now like to see that program rolled out on a continuous basis whether it be in Crown Street or Redfern Street or Glebe Point Road or Chinatown, and really provide opportunities for people to socialise and also to support the businesses. The businesses have taken such a terrific hit. And we still haven't worked out quite how we're going to reoccupy our city, but we are doing everything we can to try and make people feel welcome in our city, want to come back and be in our city, because really coming together, for cultural events, for work events, for socialising is all so important to us all as humans. So we're working on all those things.
Mayor Khan, I want to talk still on this theme of a post-COVID recovery period. You've been really working to bring in international tourists. That's been a big focus for you, I know. Tell us about the Let's Do London plan and the international tourism campaign and its links to all these other themes we've been talking about.
Look, like Sydney, London is a great city because of the international tourists that come to our city. We have in a normal year around 22 million international tourists that come to London. It contributes about £11 billion towards our economy. Think about the jobs in retail, hospitality, culture, the nightlife, and so forth. And that collapsed during the pandemic for good reasons, we understand. We began last year a campaign, Let's Do London. Last year was about encouraging domestic tourists back, not just Londoners, as Clover's done in Sydney, to come back to the centre We'll also encourage those around the country to come to London, and it's been a huge success last year. We invested from City Hall £6 million in Let's Do London. And this year, Patricia, we've pivoted towards an international campaign. We're investing £10 million, and we'll be advertising overseas to encourage tourists back to London. We've got a whole year of activities taking place. The ABBA reunion taking place in London. Great concerts. The Stones are back, Lady Gaga and so forth. We have the Queen's Platinum Jubilee taking place from May and June onwards, and a whole host of activities to encourage international tourists back. And it's really important, now that it's safe to travel, now that we know the restrictions have been lifted, we encourage our friends from across the globe, including Sydney, to come back and visit London.
Well, London is a fabulous place to visit, I've got to say.
Yeah. Well, if you
lived there for nearly 5 years.
if you get your constituents to visit Sydney, we could probably do an exchange program or something.
I think we could.
I'm sure we could work on that.
The condition is, as long as Australians don't talk about cricket.
Look, Lord Mayor, I just want to bring you back to transport, which we know is key, really, to vibrant, future-looking cities. How important is it to have a vision for the future to attract investment? We've talked a lot about George Street, and you're right. There are a lot of naysayers about George Street, and yet now everyone wants to own that idea. The investment part of the puzzle, talk to me about the vision and the transport piece, and do you think that there is enough of a focus when we come to the state and federal level as well?
Well, I think the state government has had a good, strong focus on rail and on metro, and we'll see metro coming online, which will be great. We would like to see it not only happening in the city centre, but also in the Piedmont area and in the Green Square area. We'd like to see it connecting up those innovation hubs and enabling people to get round the city centre, to get to cultural events, and we think this is absolutely critical. It also, I mean, you know, we outside the city of Sydney, we are very car dependent, and we really want people to be able to come into the city, you know, and the more metro will enable us to free up a lot of space for people, for greening. As I said, that's an incredibly important thing for us with our increasing temperatures, and that then provides for increasing investment. You know, and I think George Street is a good example because we saw it being embraced by the development industry in terms of fabulous buildings happening there in the street too, and investment in the city. Investment in the city, investment in the street, and that's good. So it's good for people, their opportunities, and it's also good for the economy.
I want to end...
And also, we'd like to see the bike network extended out right across the metropolitan area so that people could safely could ride on safe separated cycleways right into the heart of the city. And I think that would be a great thing.
Clearly, bit of support for that in this room.
As would everyone else, I think.
I just want to end our conversation arguably, well, no, I'm not going to prioritise, one of the more important conversations, and that is affordable housing. It's so key. Mayor Khan, how has London used innovative models and the planning system to deliver affordable housing? Because London has really been best practice. Talk us through those ideas.
Well, I think Clover in her speech, she talked about the importance of affordable housing for the cleaners, the porters, so forth, to be able to live, the firefighters close to where they work. And it's the same challenge all global cities have. How do you make housing affordable for what I call key workers, the firefighters, the teachers, the nurses, so forth? And actually, the market doesn't work. And that's why a good Lord Mayor, a good mayor, will have to interfere with the market using the planning process and the powers that we have. What we've done is we've said to developers, you're more than welcome to build homes in London, but there's a condition. And the condition is that a certain percentage must be genuinely affordable. What I've done is given an incentive for developers to use a fast track. If you agree that 35% of your homes will be genuinely affordable, you can fast track the planning process. Otherwise, my expectation is 50% need to be affordable, and you go through the process. And lo and behold, we've managed to increase affordable homes in London. Last year, we began building more municipal housing than any year since the 1970s. And when I became mayor, roughly speaking, 12% of the homes the previous mayor gave permission to were affordable. Now it's approaching 50%. So we're now having a pipeline of affordable homes.
So, Mayor Khan, I have to ask, how did you get everyone on the same page on housing, and what advice or lessons can Sydney learn? We also have the New South Wales Treasurer in the room, in the New South Wales government, so let's hear what your advice is for what Sydney could embark on.
Look, when you speak to big employers, and the Lord Mayor does this in Sydney every day, big employers are complaining they can't get the staff because they don't live locally. They're complaining about the lack of access to talent. It's in everyone's interest, whether you're a big employer, a medium employer, whether you're the public sector, to have key workers living near to where they work. I mean, it doesn't make sense travelling an hour and a half to your office or to the place of work, an hour and a half on the way home. It's possible to make profits and do it in a way that's sustainable and that addresses this housing crisis that cities like Sydney, London, Paris, New York face. We're facing greater urbanisation. The populations around the globe are moving nearer to their cities, moving into the cities. Over the next 10 years, roughly speaking, 2/3 of the world's population will live in our cities. So we need good quality homes. We need sometimes high density homes. We need to think about these homes being affordable, and it's possible to make profits at the same time as ensuring that genuinely affordable homes are being built.
I've visited some of that affordable housing in London, and it's incredibly impressive. I went to Hackney and saw the new housing that you've done there. This is a state responsibility, unfortunately, for us here. You know, there are two tiers of government in Britain, you know, national and city, and we have three here. And so we have to advocate strongly to federal and state governments to provide adequate affordable housing. They need a policy to commit to affordable housing. They need to support community housing providers. They need to make and ensure that all government-owned sites have at least 25% of affordable housing on each of them, and they need to fund and provide land to community housing providers. This is to provide affordable rental housing for people that's secure and in perpetuity. It's also about ensuring that we keep our social housing population in the city as well. We've seen a loss of social housing in our city in my time as mayor because of policies of the state. I've been really impressed with the humanitarian policies in London. And, you know, the global city of Australia is Sydney. It is the most expensive city in the country. And we need to ensure that we are able to provide affordable and social housing into the future, and it has to be policy by both federal and state governments. We're going into a federal election now. Now's a very good time to be talking about affordable housing. I went to Canberra with the other capital city Lord Mayors to lobby for funding for affordable and social housing in Sydney. Didn't get much of a response. I was particularly lobbying to get them to put some money into the Waterloo housing development so that we would be able to save that public housing on that site. Not interested. You know, so it's about having a policy, and with federal and state government elections coming up, we need to make sure it's right up there, second to action on climate change, I'd say.
Well, please, I think you've just done it for me, but we'll do it one more time. Please thank the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sadiq.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Sadiq.
Next is a message to Sydney from renowned Danish architect and urban designer Jan Gehl. whose work with the City of Sydney during the past 2 decades has been instrumental in reshaping the city centre. His influence has been and will be a catalyst to many other significant projects for the future of Sydney. Here it is.
Hello, Sydney. I'm speaking to you here from Copenhagen. It is midsummer here in Scandinavia, and we are celebrating the lightest days of the year. And I know that it's another situation in Sydney, but I would still rather be there than here for this event. I'm very honored to be invited to give a little input to the CityTalks, where the situation in Sydney in 2050 will be discussed. Sustainable Sydney 2050. And I also want to congratulate the Lord Mayor, Clover, and the City of Sydney to all the hard work they have been accomplished towards a greener, more sustainable and more people-friendly city through a number of years, and is now going to continue this work in this new plan. I'm very confident that the goal will be reached, and we'll be even more proud of what has been happening in Sydney. There's been much scare and much talk about this pandemic with COVID, and I think I have good news, because if we look at history, cities have been continuously hit by disasters. There has been pandemics, there's been pest and cholera, there's been Spanish flu, there's been tuberculosis, there's been city fires, inundations, earthquakes, there's been wars. And every time everything comes to a standstill, we see a little while later, when the sky is once more blue, we see people come out again and start all over, because Homo sapiens has a history of millions of years as a walking animal with a very strong interest in other people. That will prevail, and we'll, strangely enough, we'll forget about this COVID in a short while, I predict. My story with Sydney goes back to 2005, when I was traveling, lecturing in Brisbane and Melbourne, but stopped over in Sydney by coincidence and gave one talk, met the newly elected mayor, and at once things started to happen. And in the end, I gave more lectures in Sydney than in Brisbane and Melbourne together on that particular trip, and that was the beginning of a very long collaboration between Gale Architects and the City of Sydney. We were invited to come and do a big study about how people were faring in Sydney. And certainly they were not faring very well. It was very, very clear that much more has been done to make the cars happy than to look after the people who used City of Sydney. The waterfront was wonderful. The city centre was quite awful. People had to wait for long hours walking across the city. Up to 50% of all walking time was spent waiting for a bloody red light. So it was not a very good city at all for people. It was rather good for cars. All this has been changed. We started in 2007 to record all these phenomena and point out ways in which Sydney could be improved. And over the years, we've seen a fantastic change of a number of things in Sydney. In 2020, we repeated the study, and it was very, very clearly that so many things have been changed. Of course, especially the grand idea of the pedestrian spine, George Street, with the light rail running from one end of the city to the other, and also the idea of introducing and doing much more for the bicyclist. All this has been accomplished, and many more. But I think that the major accomplishment which has happened in Sydney as in many other cities across the world, is that in this period the mindset has changed. We have shifted from being very friendly to the cars to starting to be increasingly concerned and friendly towards the people. In city all over the world, everything is done to make people walk and bicycle and take public transportation as much as possible as part of a sustainability agenda. One of the great moments in my life was the day when I received the golden key for the city of Sydney from the Lord Mayor, Clover, and the city. Normally it would be hanging just behind me here, but just in these days, or this summer, it is on exhibition in the Danish Architectural Center in a special version of my life, which they put up over there. So no key here, but a key in my heart. I'm a citizen of Sydney. I actually feel closer to you in Sydney than to any of the other cities I work with, because we work for such a long time, and we worked in so many ways, and we've had so many victories, all sometimes in very harsh conditions. Now there is this new plan for Sustainable Sydney 2050. I wish you the very best luck in carrying this plan through. I'm quite confident, because if any city can do this, you can do it. I was so sorry that because of the pandemic, I was not able in person to come down and join you for the opening of George Street and the light rail. I hope one day it will be possible to see with my own eyes all the accomplishments which has been made in the later years. I wish you the best of luck for the future, and I can hardly wait to see what you have done. Thank you and good luck.
Okay. Anyone need to stretch their legs? Get a bit excited, because this is my favourite part of the evening. It's time now for you, the audience, to start sending your questions to the panel using our hashtag CityTalks. So please help me welcome to the stage our local leaders and experts to discuss issues and projects that are critical for the future of Sydney. The Honourable Matt Keane MP, New South Wales Treasurer and Minister for Energy, please welcome him. Ronnie Khan AO is the CEO of Oz Harvest, but is joining us virtually tonight. Ken Ma AO, yep, absolutely, keep clapping while I talk. Ken Ma AO, Hassel Fellow and the President of the Australian Sustainable Built Energy Council.
Hi, Ken.
Emily McDaniel, the Director for First Nations at the Powerhouse Museum. Please welcome her. She's also the curator for the Eora Journey for the Harbour Walk. Nikki Hutley, who is a councillor at the Climate Council, economics consultant, social outcomes, generally a legend. Please welcome Nikki Hutley. And Gabrielle Metcalf, the CEO of the Committee for Sydney. And me, I'm going to take my seat. I like being at the centre. Okay. Now, I'm going to pose a question to all of you, and I've already briefed them that I want their elevator pitch for this question. And this question is really this. In a post-COVID-19 world, what are the immediate things we must do to seize the opportunity to transform Sydney, in your view? I'm going to start with you, Treasurer.
Well, I think one of the
biggest lessons we should have taken out of the pandemic is how important it is to build coalitions and to find common ground to provide solutions to problems that we thought were impossible to solve. The point that I was making is that we solved one of the biggest crises that this country has ever seen, better than anywhere else in the world, by coming together, listening to the science and making decisions based on evidence. And I think we should take that approach and apply it to other challenges that we face, like climate change, for example, and we'll go a long way to solving these problems as well.
Emily?
I found it really interesting in COVID when the walk became the most exciting thing about our day. You know, our entire life became focused on how we could get out into green spaces. And I don't want us to lose that passion and urgency. I think we've got a really important moment where everyone here cares about our public spaces, and we need to capitalise and move on that to create those moments in our city.
Ronnie Khan, you're here virtually, but you're very much in the room with us. What's your pitch for how we can use this opportunity?
For me, it's about creating a city that embraces all the diverse elements of our society, particularly the vulnerable, be they old or young, with access to food security. We did manage that through COVID. Homeless people were housed. How do we create a city that embraces all of us?
Nikki Hutley.
Well, I think we first need to know what are the lessons that we've learned from COVID, and I think two key things for our city are, the green spaces and how we use them, but also our workspaces and what that means for the future of the city in terms of who's working here and who's not, and all the support things that go on around that. What type of city do we want to be? Because it has changed. But then I think the Treasurer's absolutely spot on. When we decide how we want to transform, you have to get the collaboration. It's not enough to have the vision. We have to plan, we have to collaborate, and we have to bring everyone along with us. Now, it's easy to say those words. It's a heck of a lot harder to do them. But we've already seen City of Sydney's done a lot of that through community consultation. Everybody's city is different. If you're living up in the Cross, or you're in Green Square, or you're down in the CBD, just the City of Sydney alone is a whole collection of different villages. Sydney Metropolitan is a much bigger collection. How do we bring all of those together and how do we connect them? Because people are inevitably travelling from point A to point B and we have to make it simple for them. It's a huge task, but it starts with the planning, I think.
Gabrielle?
Good. I've been giving some thought to the politics of COVID. We live in this time when the conventional wisdom is you cannot ask people to make a sacrifice if you want to win an election. But what we saw with COVID is that if you tell people where we need to go and you ask people to do their bit, people are willing. People are willing to make great sacrifices to take care of one another if they trust that there's a plan. And so, as the Treasurer said, the obvious place we need to apply that lesson is climate change, where we need to stop being afraid to ask people to step up and do their bit. People want to do their bit as long as we have a sense that we're all in it together.
Now, Ken?
Yes, I'm also very interested in this idea that has caused us to sort of pause and think a little bit about what sort of community we have. I think it's strengthened the idea of local communities, as well as, importantly, the rethinking how we engage with the city in a much more creative way. And it seems to me, I very much like Mayor Khan's comment about this interconnection with our understanding of climate change, because I think that, and I think Gabrielle said something similar, but that's a profound opportunity and a profound shift in the way that we think about our lives, and it's critical that we address it rapidly.
Treasurer and Energy Minister, because you actually are right in this space, you've talked a lot about the opportunities for Sydney that will arise from a rapid transformation to a decarbonised economy. One plan is your green investment strategy. You say you want to be an energy and economic superpower, but what obstacles do you face to get there?
Well, there are a lot of obstacles. I mean, we've seen the political obstacles that have held this country back for over a decade when it comes to solving the issue of climate change. But that's just one. There are a number of other practical obstacles in terms of developing the right policies to solve these problems. But they can be overcome. And, you know, just like I said earlier, working collectively, forming coalitions, finding common ground amongst people from different political persuasions or different communities, diverse backgrounds, finding that common ground where we can work together on a shared goal, we can actually get things done. And I think when it comes to the issue of climate change, the shared goal for the city, for the state, for our nation should be, how do we lower the cost of living for people living in our communities? And you can do that by rolling out renewables at scale, because you'll get cheap, reliable, and also clean energy. How to create new jobs and investments into this country? Well, by creating new industries. Half the world's wealth today is being generated in jurisdictions that have committed to net zero. So we can be on the right side of history, creating these new industries that will drive jobs and investment and underwrite a next generation of prosperity. These are the opportunities that are too great to pass up. And I'm not arguing this just because I'm a woke greenie. I'm arguing this stuff because I'm economically rational, and we should grab the biggest economic opportunity that our country has ever seen.
Now, I am loving the clapping. Let's just hold off on the clapping so that we can just get some, although clearly people really liked your answer, so you would be loving that, wouldn't you, right now?
My mum must be.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Nikki Hutley, public transport is important, but what incentives are needed to change that picture, the way that Sydney kind of public transport story works?
Yeah, so most people will tell you, I mean, there's different aspects that encourage people. Obviously, you've got to have the public transport. It's got to be accessible to people. So it's got to be accessible both for the people who are to get on it and for the things that they want to get to at the other end. So your start and end points need to be where people are living and where they're working or going to school or hospitals or whatever's happening. Now, Australia has a particular problem because we are one of the least dense cities, or have the least dense cities in the world. And unfortunately, cost comes into this. And so those of you who've heard me talk before know that I'm very passionate about the environment and society, but I am also trained as an economist. So I know that we can say we want parks and we want trains and we want cycleways, but somebody has to pay for these. And we do have limited resources. So we have to understand what are the things that will give us the best outcomes. And one of the things I'd say to the people in this room and more broadly in Australia is we have to understand density better. Our cities are getting much bigger. Density can be done well. It doesn't have to be giant concrete blocks. We can include green spaces. We can include playgrounds that encourage social connection. You know, we lower our environmental footprint when we live in smaller places, as long as we've got good spaces to get out into the green. So we just need to think about this a bit better. But, you know, the first step is make sure that they're accessible to everybody, and also that getting from A to B, World Bank studies show that if you make the walk to the station, with exciting things along the way, people will actually much more happily walk a kilometre to a station than they will 100 metres if it's dark and scary. And so just good design.
Ronnie Khan, I want to bring you in. I don't want to discourage either. I just want to bring in Ronnie, though. Ronnie Khan, how do you create a unified city between the haves and the have-nots? Because it does feel, and we're all noticing this anecdotally, and the data shows it too, that there is rising inequality and a sense that our big cities, and Sydney being our biggest, feel more divided, feel like there is this disconnect. What policy settings do you need to try and bridge that?
So first of all, to create a humane city, you need to provide the most vulnerable with services. But to create a unified city, those services need to be provided with dignity and choice. So, there are two questions there. So there's no doubt that we have to take our whole population into account, not just the haves, as you've just said. You know, if I think about our Refectorio, which is a restaurant right in the heart of Surrey Hills, looks exquisite, but it is a place that embraces diversity and invites and uplifts the soul as well as the belly. So those kind of examples, our Waterloo supermarket, which services 1,400 people a week, because we do know that now, since COVID, 1 in 6 Australians need food relief at some point. So there are models that could be rolled out. As I said, our market could be rolled out across the city. But if you're looking at policies, I mean, Sydney should be a world leader at tackling both the dual imperatives of reducing food waste and feeding the hungry. And so, Mr. Treasurer, it would be amazing. I call on you to create a New South Wales food security and food systems plan to address the related problems of food insecurity and food waste, given that 0.02% of wasted food is rescued and 89,000 tons of food is wasted, 70% of which is edible.
I want to put that to the Treasurer because he's here. Quickly, before I move on to Gabrielle, I've got a question for you. But Treasurer, is that something worth exploring?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I was a bit late tonight is because I'm currently working my way through the budget process. The state budget is in June this year, and ministers are putting up their requests, and we've got about 1,500 requests for funding. But you know, these are the kind of progressive, innovative policies that we're going to need if we're going to address the growing inequality in our cities and across our state. And whether it be that or affordable housing, action on climate change, there are going to be trade-offs if we're going to make sure that we manage our state's finances responsibly. But I'm very focused on making sure that we invest in the things that are going to support a fairer, better and more equitable society.
Gabrielle Metcalf, there is a tension between livability and accommodating population growth. Good cities manage that tension, but how do you manage that tension? How do you nail that balance?
Yeah, it's very appropriate we've featured Mayor Khan, because London is one of those cities that has really managed to keep growing while becoming more livable, and that is what the great cities find a way to do. If you stop growing in order to protect livability, you are no longer a global city because you have cut yourself off from people being able to come and join the city. So look, I think it starts, the first thing is you have to put the growth in the right places. And for Sydney, that is concentrating growth around the rail stations. If you live within 1 or even 2K of a rail station, you can walk and you can get all around. And so I think that's the essence. It unlocks sustainability, but it also is the solution for affordability. It's how you grow and remain livable. But then the next question is, how is it designed? I think this does not, achieving good design does not mean having years and years of debate in meetings. It's quite the opposite. It means having clear rules so that you can welcome development easily and quickly, and everybody knows what's expected, and you're only allowed to build things that are great.
That'd be nice.
So Ken, you mentioned design there. Ken, what is the role of design here? Tell me about the role of visionary projects that kind of capture the imagination and momentum, and how important they are to trying to kind of galvanising support around something.
Well, I think, isn't it wonderful to have a strategy, have a direction? I think the Lord Mayor should really be congratulated on that. But indeed, that's the kind of what. But the how is, I think, about projects and design, about the experience of the city. We need delight in our city. particularly if we're encouraging people to come into the city. And I think that delight is about design which is not just functional, but design which has beauty, it has the quality that each city is distinctive. That's the other issue. I think it's interesting when we hear Mayor Khan talk, the same challenges that we have, the same strategies in a way, but how do we contain and design the distinctiveness of Sydney? And Sydney is such a beautiful landscape city, and that ties in very much with this notion of enriching the greenness. It's a public city, all cities are public, but Sydney, through its climate, is particularly a public city. And I think if we don't nurture it in the way that it can be most distinctive, but also design control is really important, as I think we just heard, that the city unregulated will possibly destroy that particular quality that it needs to have. And so governments really need to play a key role in not only hearing the aspirations of the community, but ensuring that design is delivered at the highest level, because it's very hard to undo. A quick anecdote, Melbourne is such a lovely city, and this is not a Sydney-Melbourne thing, I must say, but Melbourne had a 10 or 20-year program about improving its public spaces, which was commendable, and I think it influenced what we've done here in Sydney. But Melbourne went through a period of deregulating and not controlling the density of development in parts of the city. And I think it's really been detrimental to that city. So there's a salutary lesson there that we do need to ensure that we continue. And the city's been doing great work here on the quality of design, but we need to continue that.
Emily, it's often perceived that First Nations culture is somewhat unseen in our cities, because it is unseen in our cities. I know the City of Sydney is trying to transform that. Talk to me about that journey of trying to create more visibility for First Nations people, but also actually embedding that into a city, not making it an afterthought, but actually making it at the centre of the city.
Yes, I'm often intrigued by that lack of visibility. It's something that we've used in Australia quite a lot. It's not visible, and in many ways that's allowed us to detach from the truth of our histories. For 2050, we're not looking for visibility anymore. We need to be looking for recognition. And recognition can take form in many ways. It can be a public art strategy, interpretation, ceremony, events, affordable housing. For Sustainable 2030, it was really the aspirations of community. Over 87% of people actually said that they wanted greater recognition for Aboriginal people in the city. And over 200 members of the Aboriginal community supported the development of the Eora Journey. Conceived by Dylan Combermary and led by Hetty Perkins, the Eora Journey sets out a visionary approach for how the city will achieve this, how we will celebrate the continuous living culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Since the launch of the Eora Journey and its many successful projects, we've also seen the emergence of the Connecting with Country framework by the Government Architects Office that really urges development and infrastructure to consider the importance of respecting and reflecting First Nations culture. So we're at an incredibly important moment here in Sydney. We cannot go any further without acknowledging our First Nations histories here, and we will be marked upon it by our future generations. So a key aspect of the Eora Journey is Yananurula, which will be a harbour walk project, 9 kilometres stretching from Parama in the city's west through to the iconic bays that we all know and love, Darling Harbour, Circular Quay, through to Bayingua, Garden Island. And it really sets out that future vision for how we will be achieving this in the future. The City of Sydney has set its cornerstone for what we will develop into the future. We've identified Yananurula as one of the key strategic projects, and in fact also as one of the 6 guiding principles employed in decision-making will be the imperative need to be accountable to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices. So at the same time as addressing recognition, what do we not see? What do we see? Acknowledging what is there, what has always been there. First Nations businesses, cultural tours that have been operating for decades. We need to ensure that there are economic growth opportunities for them to actively participate in this future. It's not always creating a new, it's about looking at what we already have.
Very well put. And to that point of recognition, not just about being seen, but recognition.
Absolutely.
I didn't just say you could tweet your questions and then I was going to ignore them. I'm about to include them. And in fact, it's a perfect pivot point for a very important conversation. And Alice has written a question which is, how can we better leverage the local planning system to increase affordable housing in inner Sydney, critical for a prosperous, diverse and equitable and sustainable city? I'm going to ask you, Nikki Hutley, what needs to happen, and then Treasurer, listen very carefully because I'm going to ask if you're going to do it.
So I don't think it's just about local planning for a start. When I talked earlier about collaboration, as part of the problem with a lot of our issues, whether it's climate or affordable housing, it's because different levels of government have different types of priorities and they don't always speak to each other. You heard the Lord Mayor talking before about, asking federal government, talking with state government about what you can do. There are lots of different things we know already right across the board. So one of the things is for social housing, making land available. It might work in London, but the financial model in Australia, because land is so expensive in our cities, you need some government support. That just goes without saying. It's great to have things like lower financial rates through something called a bond aggregator at the federal level, but we need a lot more. You need the collaboration of all those levels. So it's financial support, but it's also a consistent policy towards the provision, having targets set that then have to be met. And we saw that people, particularly the state government, stepped up with the COVID recovery and said, we need to spend some money, so here we are. I think Australians now understand that spending money can be a good thing. Obviously, governments can't build endless debt, but we have never anywhere in Australia had a consistent and permanent affordable and social housing policy. We keep swapping and chopping and changing. We know what to do. We could get rid of things like negative gearing and beneficial capital gains tax. We can do much better things on density rules. Older Australians particularly have to get over their NIMBYism. We can do density better. As I said before, it doesn't have to be giant high-rises. But we all have to pitch together to understand if we want our kids. I don't know about you, but I've got kids who like to get into the property market, and unless you're lucky enough to have the bank of mum and dad, you've got to save 14 years for a deposit if you're on an average income with two people with household. So we know all of these policy things that we can do. It's not a question of what to do, it's actually a question of all levels of government sitting down and also having having the balls to take on the squeaky wheels of NIMBYism and say, this is what will make our city better. The cities are only going to get larger, this is only going to be more of a problem, and we can't just keep building train lines out to everywhere, we can't afford it. So, we've got the policies there, we just need to do something. Implement them.
I think Nikki, as usual, is absolutely right. We've got a big challenge in this city, in this state. We've got a backlog of affordable housing. There's a waiting list of about 60,000 in this state. There's 5,800 on the priority housing waiting list. They're people at risk of being homeless if we don't get them a home immediately. So the supply isn't keeping up with the demand, and if you're going to bridge that gap, there's a couple of things you need to do. As Nikki said, you need very clear targets and alignment between federal, state and local government, and we can do that. We did it during the pandemic and we should be doing it when it comes to this policy challenge. You also need regulatory reform, and I want to acknowledge the outstanding work of the Lord Mayor here of Sydney, having clear targets for developers when it comes to putting affordable housing into their commercial operations. And the third thing is investment from governments, and that means direct financial investment in building affordable and social housing.
Is this going to be in your budget?
Well, I'm not going to give you a scoop here tonight, PK, but you'll find out at the end of June.
Okay, I'll wait, but clearly, let me just ask one more targeted question, Treasurer. I'm hearing from you that you're getting it. You get that this is a massive crisis. Is it going to be a priority area for the government in the budget? I'm not asking for every policy that will be unveiled, but is that going to be a focus?
Yes. And let me be very clear. So there are three priority policy areas when it comes to housing affordability. Firstly, the accessibility for young people and families to access the property market. That's the first thing. The second thing is social affordable housing, addressing that gap. And also affordable housing is making sure that our key workers, our police, our fireys, our teachers can afford to live in this city, which is becoming increasingly out of reach for so many people. The third thing is the regions. We've seen with COVID, there's been this mass exodus from the cities. People can now live in rural and regional New South Wales, and the rental market is just so tight there. So families are getting squeezed out, particularly vulnerable people. We need to address that gap. It is a key area of focus of the Premier, and he's given me the responsibility of finding the money, which we don't have, to make this happen.
Great. Okay, sounds easy. Gabrielle Metcalf, affordability of housing is really the biggest failing of Sydney as far as I can see. How do you start to shift it? Obviously some promising signs from the New South Wales government, but what are the immediate areas of priority?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything the previous speakers have said. There is this great contradiction. Everybody believes in affordability, but nobody wants the house they own to go down in price. And if you think about that, if it is a crisis for home prices to go down for most voters, because it's the source of most of their wealth, it's the source of their retirement, you can see why this is so politically difficult to solve. I think we don't need to tank housing prices. What we need is to put the settings in place so that over a very long period of time, wages rise faster than housing prices. That will take action from federal and state and local government. But in terms of the part that is about the planning system in New South Wales, I think a really good measure of how much that's contributing to the problem is the difference in home prices between Sydney and Melbourne, because they both are under the same national system. They both don't have negative gearing reform. All of that is the same. The regulatory failure on the land use side is what makes Sydney more expensive than Melbourne. So that could be changed. That could be fixed by the state. And I'm very encouraged by what we're hearing.
There's a really good question I'd like to put to you in relation to trying to change the mix and the kind of importance for the cultural heart of the city as well. Tell me about the case for the cultural future of the city. What happens when you make a city homogenous? You make it just for elites. What are the risks?
Well, diversity is the principle of sustainability, of course, and the richness of cultures. And we have a wonderful legacy from our Indigenous brothers and sisters, but also we have such a broad community that's multicultural that if we don't find ways of expressing that, and it gets expressed largely through the arts, through food, the arts, and some degrees through sport. And these things the city needs to be able to provide the venues for these. And it's equally as important to me as public space, because I think it's an extension of the public realm in a sense. And the city, there's been a big reduction more recently in the amount of space that's available for cultural events. And often it's the very small things that count as well, not the huge events. But I think the city is already doing this, but there needs to be a really concerted effort on keeping enough space, physical space within the city, and it's very often well connected to the major public spaces of the city. So I think, again, it's a policy issue and it's an economic issue, but the cities that thrive, as the Mayor of London said, the cities that thrive are the cities that support the culture and diversity of the city, and the economy follows. And so sometimes we think of it the wrong way around.
Emily, diversity obviously is at the key of that conversation about accessibility. First Nations people have been squeezed out of the city, and there has been a huge issue around that. Talk to me about the stress on the community as that has happened, as it's become less accessible, and what that's done in terms of fraying of relationships and making this a place that should be a safe place where First Nations people are embedded in the city.
We have to remember the inextricable link between custodianship and country, and being able to access your country. And don't ever be confused by the amount of concrete that is in our city. It does not detract from country and custodianship. Aboriginal people have a right to continue to access their cultural lands, to practice their culture, and at the City of Sydney we take that incredibly seriously. It's our responsibility to create a future framework that enables that to happen. And for us at this point in time, it is Yananurala, which identifies a strategic framework that invites First Nations people to continue to practice their culture as they have always done. There has never been a break of cultural practice in Sydney.
Ronnie Khan, I don't want you to feel excluded at home. We're very happy that you're on the stage with us. I know you are incredibly passionate about people who are struggling the most in our communities, being embedded and welcome in communities. What kind of immediate policy setting do you think needs to shift to let that happen? You've given the Treasurer one idea, and he took that on before. He's got quite a list actually after tonight, so I'll send you a document later. But talk to me about what you would like to see happen immediately in relation to that.
Look, I think to create resilient, vibrant, diverse cities, you have to scale up services to support the vulnerable. And the key to scalable services is flexible funding and collaboration with government and the private sector. You know, if I think about a city right now, the city of Milan is an extraordinary example, and I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but it's a great case study because they established a citywide food waste policy that brought together government, business, universities, and charities. They set up 3 food waste hubs, which rescue and redistribute 130 tons of food per year. That's 260,000 meals. And that has been recognized that, you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but the Earthshot Prize, which is this very new prize that the Prince of Wales has set up, that has just been awarded to that city. So we know what needs to be done. You just cannot forget the vulnerable. You're talking about housing and affordable housing and negative gearing. I mean, vulnerable people don't have housing. There are all these magnificent empty buildings. Why can we not repurpose them? There are just so many ways to make an inclusive city for all of the citizens of the city, the old, the young, the vulnerable, and those that can. We can create a village that includes everybody, but it will take scalable services, funding, proposals.
quick one for you, Treasurer, and it's another one from the audience. When is the nighttime economy going to be a reality? Would love to visit a bookshop or get a haircut after 6 p.m. on a weekday.
Well, I see Michael Rodriguez, our nighttime commissioner, sitting in the front row there, and I want to acknowledge the outstanding work he's doing. Look, I think the Premier would throttle me if he found out that I was airing my personal opinions here tonight. But,
would he?
Well, I'm unaccustomed to doing this, but I mean, I'm frustrated about our city and the restrictions on our nightlife, our ability to go out and enjoy a drink. Obviously, there was some laws put in place a number of years ago in response to the one-punch attacks that occurred. I think the city has demonstrated that we can deal with that in a mature way, and I would certainly like to see us loosening restrictions when it comes to our city's nightlife, sooner rather than later.
There you have it. Now, one last question for all of you. It's the same question I'm going to pose to all of you. I've already briefed you that I'd like sort of your punchy response to this. I want to end on this question. The City of Sydney has outlined a vision tonight. The Lord Mayor, Clover, explained to us this vision. Clear and really tangible ideas. Which ones would you back, and do you want to see happen?
Look, I'll pick the finishing building out the cycle network. It is the missing mode for Sydney. It could become a huge part of how we all get around, and it's so simple. You just need a safe place to ride.
For me, there can't be one thing, because climate change, the climate emergency, is so, it's here and it's now, and we have to act. You just heard from the IPCC again this morning, the third working group, about what's facing us. So we need to do everything in our power, from the cycleways to electric vehicle charging stations, to electric public transport and vehicles, to solar everywhere, renewable energy as far as we can go, building codes that get to 7 stars. We have to do it holistically. We can't. I'm sorry, but I can't pick one, because this is too important for us to just say one thing. So I'm cheating, but
you are cheating, but I'm going to let it go, and I don't want anyone else to cheat. Treasurer.
The one thing that stands out to me from the Lord Mayor's vision statement is her vision for a green city. One that's focused on reducing our carbon footprint, creating new jobs, making our city more vibrant and livable, reducing our waste footprint and driving a circular economy. That's not only good for the City of Sydney, that's great for our state here in New South Wales and indeed our country, and it's what's going to underwrite the next wave of prosperity that we've never seen before, and we should embrace it, and congratulations to Clover and her team.
Emily?
I'll have to be biased here. As curator of Yananurula, I would absolutely and do back Yananurula. We're at a point where an acknowledgement of country needs to be more than just words. It has to be an action, a responsibility, a strategic framework and a commitment. As we acknowledge country, we respect it with greater care, and we develop a more compassionate community. And that's what we need to see to get us to 2050.
Well, I'm a bit of the view that it's an integrated package. However, I think there are 3 things, if I can have it. See, I'm ending up. I'm with the Treasurer. Greening the city is so important. It's about amenity, it's about pleasure, it's about heat control, and it's about sustainability. I think Metro is catalyst to make new regional centres, villages around the city. And the Southwest line is going to be really important, I think, to bring everybody in, as the Lord Mayor says. But I think it's important they're not just transport projects, they're community building projects. Mm-hmm. They're about public space, community facilities, and building the connection between our diverse communities. And the third, of course, is housing. Housing is the building block of our cities. We have really narrow models. We have small apartments and suburban houses. We need the models between all that, and I think government needs to be more interventionist in providing long-term secure rental. The shift from ownership to rental is really very important.
And Ronnie, the final word to you.
Thank you. Well, a resilient city must actively fight against climate change, and food waste feeds climate change. So I am totally committed to working, creating labs, creating innovative ways, helping every single one of us fight food waste. We've got UN SDG goals to achieve by 2030. That's only 8 years away. We have to halve food waste. We have to have a city that commits to fighting climate change.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our panellists who, I've got to say, have been very candid in their passion and views. I really want to thank them all. Please give them a very loud round of applause.
Thank you to everybody who has impressed me, I cannot say how much, for turning up on a Tuesday night to engage in big conversations about the future of your city. Thank you, of course, to the Lord Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, of course, Clover, all of our panellists, and the City of Sydney for putting on this very important night. You can, of course, look at that vision and participate in those consultations for 2050. But to everyone in the audience, please thank yourselves for coming back after a very difficult and long pandemic and wanting to engage in the future of this city and our country. I'm Patricia Carvelis. Thank you so much for your company tonight. I hope you have a very safe trip home. See you later.